Hey y'all, it's me. Welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I just finished doing the red pen edits of Ottoman Destiny, the fourth book in the Trevor Knight series. Usually I don't have my own books as backdrops on my channel. Usually I have other books. But just to show you guys, book 1, German Derelict, book 2, Egyptian Demise, book 3, Syrian Dander. So this is book 4, Ottoman Destiny. I've been working on this book for about 6 years, maybe more. And so finally, I just finished doing the red pen edits of what I think's the final draft. And there are actually a lot more red pen edits than I would usually feel comfortable with. Like usually for a final draft, I would like to have like maybe 1 or 0 or maybe 2 corrections per page. But this book tends to have like closer to like 5 corrections per page, which is a lot more than I would usually have for a final draft. So it kind of got me thinking like, should I do another draft of this book? But there's kind of a reason I usually do 7 drafts of all my books, and that's kind of because I spend about 5+ years working on each book, and if I was just to keep editing until I felt really comfortable with a book, like, yep, this book is totally ready to publish, I would never finish books. So I kind of adopted like the 7 drafts thing I do just from experience. Like, okay, after 7 drafts, I have worked on a book enough. I've done enough with it. I've done all I could. I've wasted enough time on it. I just want to move on. And usually what happens after that 7th draft is I'm just so tired of looking at the book that I just don't want to like edit it at all. I'm just tired of it. And also another problem I think is after like looking at a book for that long, becoming so acquainted with it, it gets really difficult to tell any good from bad. So at that point, I think it's much more likely that I could actually start doing damage to the book, because I could start taking out things that are perfectly fine, but I've just read them, 10, 20 times at this point. So, I begin to think like, oh, that's not a good line, but that's just because I've read it 20 times. And so I take it out just thinking, oh, that's not very good. And that does damage to the book. And then again, from the opposite side, there's just, I've just been working on this book long enough, and this draft did take me probably half a year or more to do. So I think I'm just done with it. If I was to try to do another draft of this book in a few months, it would probably take me another year to get through it. And again, just like I say, I could maybe be doing more damage than good. So I think I'm done with the book. I've worked on it for 6 years or more, so I think I've done enough with this. I want to move on to other books. And yeah, so I think this is it. So basically what I'll need to do is I'll need to make the actual changes into the computer, putting all these corrections into the computer, and then I'll be able to publish the book. And right now it is just about mid-October. I don't know how long that may take me, so I'd kind of imagine it may take me a couple months to do that. So I'm kind of tentatively thinking I might publish Ottoman Destiny possibly in March. I don't know why really, but I just kind of like publishing Trevor Knight books either in like March or June, July, or August, September. I don't know, there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's just kind of a thing for me, especially March. I don't know why, and I don't know like when exactly I've published each Trevor Knight book, but I kind of feel like March is the ideal time for Trevor Knight books, or September-ish. I don't know, but generally I just kind of like March for Trevor Knight books. But I don't know, I may just publish it as soon as like I can, like as soon as I submit the edits, the updated draft, and probably order a proof copy and just make sure it all looks okay. I might just instantly publish the book. So really it could happen anytime between now and then. But yeah, so anyway, I thought I would do one last editing explain video for you guys where I go through the edits I'm making and explain why I'm making these changes. I did not think I would do this video because I've already done several videos showing the edits to Ottoman Destiny, but this one's kind of a little bit different because these are actually like final draft edits. So I am being really picky now about like each and every word. And yeah, so I'm being real selective about stuff. And I think it would actually make a good video. So I think I'm going to do this whole book in this video. So it's a big book, so I want to get along with it. And this intro has already been going on far long enough. So anyway, the final draft edits of the book. And yeah, so here we go. Okay, I had 2.5 hours of audio, but I'm doing this all over again because there was distortion. And so the audio was just kind of choppy. I was already like a couple hours into editing this video and I just decided, you know, I really just don't like this audio because there's this faint distortion in the background. So filming this all over again, 2.5 hours, let's go. I began this book with part 4, act 4, because what I've began doing is starting each draft of a book on a different act. So the first time I edit the book, I begin with the first act and work my way through the book. On the second draft, I begin with the second act and do act 2, act 3, act 4, and then do act 1. For the third draft, I begin on act 3 and do act 3, 4, 1, and 2. And for this final draft, I started with act 4 and then I went back and did act 1, 2, and 3. And the reason I do that is because I've kind of decided that this way, when I begin editing each draft, I'll have most of my energy for that act I begin with. Because I kind of reason if I start a book, every draft on the first act or whatever, chapter 1, by the time I get to the end of the book, I'll be more tired of editing. So as a result, my edits will be probably less thorough toward the end of the draft. And so what I'm trying to avoid by doing this is having the first part of the book be thoroughly edited, but the latter part of the book be not as well edited. So this way, with each draft, I give each act the maximum amount of attention. So this way, the entire book should be like equally thoroughly edited. So the first edits for Act 4 is actually like the caption for this photo, and the issue here, I realized I have, I think, 3 uses of the word known. Known in Turkish, known as the Strait of Gallipoli, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and known as the Hellespont. So I rewrote this to, I think I now just have 1 use of the word known. And kind of the reason for this like entire little note here is because I kind of decided while writing the book that since I have several different characters, I wanted to check like how would each one actually refer to this body of water, the Dardanelles. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either. So my Turkish characters refer to it as the, I don't know how to pronounce this, Bogazi. William Barrett, who is a British captain, refers to it as the Strait of Gallipoli because in the First World War, the British fought a battle against the Ottoman Turks at this place called Gallipoli. So this British character would kind of think of this strait as that, the Strait of Gallipoli. And then Constantine, who is the final Byzantine emperor, he would refer to it as the Hellespont because that was kind of the name of this body, this body of water in antiquity. But like the generic name for it is the Dardanelles. So instead of having every character refer to it as that, the Dardanelles, it's each one has their own name for it. And I like that. For this part here, Constantine, the Marble Emperor, says English is based on Latin, which is based on Greek. Well, I was just thinking, like, is it based on Latin? I mean, I know it has Latin words, but I was kind of like, I thought English was based more on German, and it was. So I just rewrote it to where Constantine says English is based on German, a language from my time, which would be true, and it is kind of fitting because even though like Germany did not exist in Constantine's time in the 1450s, it's okay because German languages did exist, and so Constantine would have been aware of those German languages, which were used to kind of form English. So yeah, this makes sense. It's kind of explaining why Constantine is able to speak English in the modern era. And then this part here, I just decided this was unnecessary all the way from Ireland. Why? Just that dialogue wasn't essential for the scene. The tone in Trevor's voice would make it clear this is a question, you know? You had a bodyguard from Ireland? And that prompts Constantine to answer. There's some more edits here, which I won't go all through. One of them I'll point out is that Constantine began speaking Greek. I didn't really like that began speaking, so I just changed it to spoke Greek. And so the way the sentence would go is Constantine spoke Greek, and then it's a little hard to tell, but there's a couple lines under gesturing, which means that's going to be capitalized. So that's the start of a new sentence. Gesturing to maps as he went, a soldier translated for him. And that's what the slash through the A means, is that means it's just like lowercase. So I'm just making that a whole sentence. Gesturing to the maps as he went, a soldier translated for him. Just tidying things up, I noticed I had repetition here, so you could see I crossed out I have, and then I have the pin pointing to another use of I have. I also see that I have repetition of, at the top you see I will return to Athens, and then just below that I will take control. So I think I might potentially also like edit that as well. And this is why I can always edit, because I'm just always finding things. And I've heard someone say before that books are never finished, they are just published. And I strongly agree with that. I mean, editing is never a finished task. You can always edit. So there just comes a point where it's like, okay, I've done enough with this book, I just have to publish it. Well, he said, so just getting rid of a use of a name. I've talked in several videos about how I like to minimize use of names and instead just use he or she. And then you see I crossed out he dryly spoke because I decided to add a little bit lower down, joking he dryly said. So since I wanted to have that there, I just got rid of the he dryly spoke line, which I didn't think really added anything essential to that line, but I thought it could, you know, help clarify that joking he dryly said. So I wanted to move it there, so I cut that thing he dryly spoke. And you can see I got rid of another Knight smiled and just changed it to he smiled. And then since I would have done that, having a sentence start with he, the next sentence would have started with he as well. He found himself wishing. So I just rewrote that sentence to be one sentence. He smiled in spite of himself and wished. Thank you, babe. For this part, I thought it was a little confusing. Baffled, Kate asked, "What is that?" It's an airplane. She crooked her head at him. Well, just because I have that she crooked her head at him after that next line of dialogue, I thought readers might think that line then, it's an airplane, would also be coming from Kate because it's she crooked her head. So that shows like that's from Kate's point of view, you know? So usually like I would have whoever is speaking the line of dialogue would be the one who's referred to after the line of dialogue. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully you get my point that it's an airplane, she crooked her head. So readers could get confused and thinking like, oh, is that Kate saying that line? And it's not, it's Gokhan. So there's that little line down beneath it, Gokhan answered. So I decided to get rid of this, like to try to keep readers from getting confused here. I just moved that up. It's an airplane, Gokhan answered. She crooked her head at him. Grinning, he slyly said, it's an active blah, blah, blah. Gokhan had turned. I tend to repeat had quite a bit in this book, so that's one thing I definitely wanted to get rid of in this draft, in this final draft, is the word had. I know it's just a word I tend to use a lot. Another one I tend to use a lot is the word was. Was is often indicative of passive sentences, and I just don't really like the word was. So those are two words I'm definitely trying to get rid of in this draft, had and was. And then this line here, a typical location on your standard 737. I kind of thought that since I have atypical location, that kind of makes that your standard little line unnecessary. And then I actually realized pretty recently that I have another use of typical a little bit lower down instead of a typical seatbelt. So I just also got rid of that typical down there, a typical seatbelt, because it's just unnecessary and it's repetition. Oh, also you could see I crossed out she saw that. This is another thing I tend to repeat a lot is saying like she looked and saw or he looked and saw. So that's just a little phrase I tend to use that I'm trying to get rid of. So I begin the sentence, each seat had a harness instead of a seat belt. Get rid of that typical seat belt because it's just repetition. And then the line were wearing, I don't really like that phrasing, so, but none of the men wore theirs. Since I like to not use character names and just use he or she, I tend to begin a lot of sentences with he or she. So that's why I decided to get rid of this one part here. And he sat and changed it to sitting beside her, he blah, blah, blah. He turned his laptop slightly from her. I didn't like that slightly line, so I just changed it to away. The convoy knight had joined, use of had, and it's just unnecessary. And the way you can tell it's unnecessary is read the sentence without it. The convoy knight joined had come under fire. I don't really mind that had, but yeah. So there's two uses of had there, and one of them is definitely you could get rid of. The convoy knight joined had come under fire. Oh, darn it. And then I see there's another had in the lower sentence. They hadn't had any contact whatsoever. But I don't know if I can get rid of that one, and so I'll just keep it. But that's also why it's so important to get rid of the hads that I know I can get rid of, because that way it makes uses like that, they hadn't had any contact, it makes it less problematic. But if I didn't change it, I'd have 4 hads in this little section. The convoy knight had joined, had come under fire. They hadn't had, and it's just in 2 lines. So I at least got rid of one of them. He drew a UAV looking a bit closer to, I just didn't really like that phrasing. It just seemed kind of amateurish. So I just changed it to like. Salisu Abu Bakar bashed the button of his controller. I didn't like that because it's like, well, does his controller only have one button? So I changed it to a button on his controller. Oh my goodness, look at all this. I think the main problem here was I have on the left, you can see Interpol had no presence. So there's a use of had that I wanted to get rid of. And then there is a use of was, meaning it was. So I just rewrote it. So yeah, I'm not going to bother reading that. But I don't know. I see I have a use of had no presence. So I think what I really rewrote this to get rid of it was the word was. And yeah. So one or the other, getting rid of had or getting rid of was, I just overuse both of them. So whenever I can get rid of either of them, that's what I like to do. Knight rolled his window down, just changed it to he, and then just below that, so Knight mentioned, again, just change it to he. This line, the head officer of the medical corps came out. Just decided to get rid of that sentence because I just didn't really like it. I felt it was kind of unnecessary because the line above it is then asked to speak with one of the medical facility senior officers. So I just thought that sentence was kind of unnecessary. And right here, I wanted to get rid of this was located because I just don't like the word was. He knew where the house was located, so I just changed it to he knew the location of the house. Same thing, here's another was, but one was left with Knight, so I just changed it to but one remained with Knight. And then I could have changed this to, after a time the soldier beside him said, but I just realized, I didn't need either of those, so I should just cut it. After a time, the soldier said. Oh, looky here, it's a couple pages that are, perfect. No edits at all. I like that. Okay, here's another use I wanted to get rid of was. He was led because that definitely feels passive. Now, something I was going to say here is that I think a lot of people who, or maybe not a lot of people, but there's definitely some people who would read this. Arriving at the palace, a staff member led him. Some people would read that and think, okay, arriving at the palace, a staff member. Okay, so it's a staff member arriving at the palace. And I think why they would do this is because I think based on how this sentence is written, the subject of this sentence would be a staff member, even though the clear subject of this sentence is supposed to be, I believe, Muammer, character Muammer. And I don't really have a problem with this myself. Arriving at the palace, a staff member led him. To me, readers should clearly know that this sentence is referring to Muammer. So the sentence would basically mean, when Muammer arrived at the palace, a staff member led him to one of the 1,200 rooms. But based on how it's written, because I think a staff member might be the subject of this sentence. I'm not sure about that, but I think it might be based on the way it's written. Arriving at the palace, people may think it's a staff member is arriving at the palace when that's not supposed to be the case. It's Muammer arriving at the palace. So originally I was going to say, I don't mind that because I think that's only like 1 in 500 people would read the sentence this way. And I think to read the sentence that way, you kind of have to like deliberately misinterpret it. Because I think contextually, you should know, since this scene is about Muammer, it's Muammer arriving at the palace and being led to this room. But some people will want to read it very literally. And then they would I think, get deliberately confused. Like, what? A staff member arrived at the palace? Where'd this come from? So I think the way I will just rewrite this, even though I don't really have a problem with it, I at least thought of a way to rewrite this, and that's to simply say something like, arriving at the palace, Muammer followed a staff member to one of 1,200 rooms. Because that way that gets rid of the he was led, which is passive. And I think it makes Muammer the subject of the sentence. Arriving at the palace, Muammer followed. So I think because of that, Muammer becomes the subject of the sentence. So that erases that, issue where the staff member might be the subject of the sentence. It's really confusing and it's annoying, and I hate English. This is why I hate English. And I think it's a stupid thing that shouldn't matter. People should know contextually that, this is about Muammer. But, I just wanted to rewrite that. Right here, I decided to move Osman after flustered because otherwise this would have 2 beats, 2 pauses. Osman, flustered, turned away briefly versus flustered, Osman turned away briefly. I know it's a real small thing. It's just, 1 pause instead of 2. But I really don't think you need 2 pauses for this sentence. It's not a so important sentence that you'd want to slow it down or whatever. I would rather have it speed up so that the pacing is quicker so readers could get through the book quicker. First off, kind of at the top right there, getting rid of that and. I thought the sentence was kind of running on a little bit, so I decided to end it after that word Himmler, and so as the president would begin the new sentence. And then you can see I wanted to get rid of this wording was given lead on, which I feel is passive. So I changed it from Erkin was given lead on to he entrusted Erkin with supervising blah, blah, blah. And then you can see there's another had I got rid of. The I Toyin had docked. So just get rid of it. I think the issue here, I didn't really like beginning the sentence with and. I don't really mind, as you can see, beginning sentences with and. But I think you should definitely use it really sparingly. And right here, I just thought, there's probably a better way I could write this. So you could see I actually drew numbers where I want to begin each line. So I'm not going to read it all out. But yeah, so the sentence would begin, or demon, she said blah, blah, blah. Then it would be, he killed 2 of my father's whatever. And then it would be, I would sooner see him. So I just rearranged the sentences here just to, in my mind, like have better pacing and whatever. And then you could see I changed a Russell said to a he said, just trying to get rid of names. I kind of do this a little bit. I tend to like having dialogue tags at the end of dialogue, hence having the Cutler asked thing at the end. But, if it's not clear contextually who is speaking, when you have the line of dialogue, readers may not know, like, okay, which character's voice should I be reading this in? So because of it, I'm sort of a little bit beginning to move some dialogue tags to the front of sentences, even though I don't think it really matters because you'll just find out in a couple words, who that line was from. But still, you may read the line of dialogue not knowing which character is saying it, and then it says, oh, Cutler asked, so that was Cutler speaking. So, I just move it to the front. Cutler asked, what are you looking for exactly? And since that was a question, I changed it from Dongan said to Dongan answered. And actually, I don't get rid of this was here. The ancient church was often used, but I do move that line due to its superb acoustics. I think just because it sounds better, maybe. So I think it'll read, due to its superb acoustics, the ancient church was often used as a concert venue. Then just to point this out, I have that line that says ignore and then something scratched out because maybe I was going to delete a comma or delete a sentence or something. But then I just decided, no, actually that's fine. So since I already made the red pen mark, I sometimes will write in ignore. So that way when I go to make these changes into the computer, I'm not like, okay, am I supposed to delete this comma or what am I supposed to do here? So yeah, I'll just leave a note for myself that, ignore that red pen mark. That's nothing. It's good as it is. Oh my goodness, look at all this. Got rid of had given him. One, because I just don't like that wording, had given, so just change it to gave, but also it gets rid of a had. I think this sentence or whatever, I kind of wanted to fix it because of the word was, maybe. On the first landing, he was met by, which is also passive, he was met by. And then, oh, I haven't mentioned this yet, but another thing I tend to repeat a lot are, I don't know what else to call them, but directions. So I'll say he looked up, she looked down, he walked left, she moved right, whatever. He took a step back. I tend to use those a lot. Up, down, left, right, front, back, whatever. As a result, when I see directions like that, I tend to notice them. So just like with had and was and everything, I kind of try to read the sentence without them. So continuing to the roof instead of continuing up the stairs to the roof, it just becomes unnecessary. And then I don't know if I've mentioned already, but I tend to repeat things like he looked and saw. So that's something I try to kind of trim down on, is just to say what they actually see instead of saying he looked and saw. So that's why I got rid of the he saw part. Oh, and also just because I didn't mention it, to the right there, I wrote keywords so I know exactly how to rearrange that sentence, because I kind of moved things around so it goes ascending, whatever, 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 a cat, whatever, 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 on the first whatever. So yeah, just hopefully make it easier on myself. And then, you could see I changed a cat trotting to a cat trotted, because trotting, I don't know exactly what tense that is, but this book is in past tense, so I kind of like words ending with ed a little bit more. And just like with the he looked and saw, this I thought was also just kind of unnecessary. Walking a few paces, he crouched beside. Well, just trim that all down and just say crouching beside and then whatever. At the very bottom there, Istanbul in a few days. I just thought that was kind of amateurish writing, so just changed it to short time. I think 3 times here I changed Cutler to he, just getting rid of character names. And also you can see this part, I mentioned it in the previous video, where I thought it'd be funny if I actually have this text appear upside down, because this character Cliff Cutler is like crouched on the floor and he looks over and he sees a ticking time bomb. But in relation to the bomb, he is upside down to it. So he sees the letters upside down. So I thought it'd be funny if the actual text appeared upside down. So I figured out how to do that on Microsoft Word. So I think it's just funny that all of a sudden the text is just upside down in a book. So I've like never seen that before in a book, but I just thought it'd be funny. Oh, this is also kind of funny as well. Tugchi, this character, goes into the room and there's like 3 dead people in the room, like including like her father's bodyguard. Her father is the president of Turkey, and originally when she walked into the room or whatever, she didn't acknowledge anything about the people in the room. So there are 3 dead people in the room. There is a guy with a gunshot wound in his head, like someone she would have known fairly well, and she just had no reaction to it whatsoever. So it was just kind of hilarious actually really thinking about it. Like, she goes into the room and doesn't even acknowledge there's 3 dead people in there. So I added this line where she like looks down and she sees this guy who's shot in the head, and she's just like, oh my god. But yeah, it's just kind of funny when I realized I didn't have that. She had no reaction to 3 dead bodies in the room. So it's just kind of funny in hindsight. Oh, so that was actually like the last edit for Act 4. So now we're actually getting into the outline of the book. So first off, you can see I crossed out that name Farouk because I decided to add that little portion there, cousin of Abdallah, to that actual character's whatever listing. So for that character, it just says his cousin is Farouk. So it just cuts down on having to list a name, and also because that guy is kind of a really minor character. But another thing I do, oh, first off, I'll also point out I had to switch around the wording of that Garrett and Gaines, because when I was reading this, I kind of realized, like, wait a minute, this is listed alphabetically, and R comes after I. So I realized those should be switched around. I kind of struggle with this a little bit. I really struggle with like I, J, K, and L, and then also R's tend to like mess me up, and also like, you know, W's, U's, V's, X's, and Y's. I just kind of get confused about the ordering. I don't know, maybe I have like some undiagnosed dyslexic issue. So yeah, I just realized that Gaines should appear before Garrett. But then the other thing I wanted to do is to get rid of some biographical details. So you could see like I cut this line, born to a British Greek radio and television personality, blah blah blah. I just don't really need that. I mean, it's not essential for reminding characters like, oh yeah, that's who this person is. So I just get rid of it in this outline or whatever. Here's another one you could see I got rid of. Born in Gurskun province, formerly ambassador to northern Cyprus. I'm not sure if I say that at all in the book, especially the Gurskin province line. So it's just unnecessary. I don't need it. The main thing is Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's all readers need to know. Same thing, getting rid of attended Robert College, the oldest blah blah blah. I say that in the narration, so you don't need it here. But I do have the line about, you know, he's the Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs and he's the speechwriter for the president, Bayati. So he's a real close advisor to him or whatever. And again, getting rid of like biographical details. Born in Izmir, previously served as consul general. Again, I don't think I mentioned that at all in the book, so it's just unnecessary. It's just taking up space. Trimming down on unnecessary words, which was, just thought it was unnecessary. Successful raid on Syracuse, which was followed by, or soon followed by. Successful raid on Syracuse, soon followed by. So it's just unnecessary. Right here, for the word yanked, I realized I actually had the word yank or yanked 2 or 3 times in this prologue scene. So I just had to trim them down. So I don't know if I got rid of all 3 of them, but I definitely got rid of 2 of them. You'll see another one on the next page. So I changed it from he yanked to he pulled. And then getting rid of the word cousin, I mentioned several times in this prologue that Farouk is the cousin of this other guy. So I just don't need all those mentions that, oh, hey, cousin, and his cousin. I just say it like probably, I don't know what, like 8 times or something. So I just really didn't need this. And also, I think it's kind of a little bit overdone when people always refer to people by their relationship in dialogue, because it's just really obviously like, oh, readers, this is my cousin. Hey, cousin, how are you? Instead of just saying, like, how you doing? They always talk like that, like, oh, hey, cousin. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of a little bit silly. I do have it in the book, of course, but, I kind of tried to trim down on it a little bit. And usually I'm trying to get rid of character names, but in this case, I thought what I was really overusing was calling the guy cousin. So instead of declared his cousin, I just changed it to Farouk declared. And then the line I scoped out, this is set in like 930 AD or something like that. So I thought that wording I scoped out felt very modern, and I do have historical characters talk in quite modern ways. I don't try to have the dialogue sound super old-fashioned, so I don't have characters talk like thee and thou and whatever, yonder and whatever. I tend to have even ancient characters speak to each other in very modern ways, because I kind of feel people are the same, like all throughout time. I mean, of course, their language is different and everything, but I mean, I don't really think people would talk so rigidly like that. They would just talk informally to each other. So as a result, that's kind of how I have dialogue. I don't have it sounding deliberately old. I just have it sound casual. But I did think that wording I scoped out felt very too modern, so I just changed it to, I think, surveyed. I don't know exactly why I have the pen pointing here. I guess it's probably just pointing to another use of the word yank. And then you could see I also got rid of a was. The sky was gray, and then I got rid of Christians who were, and then Muslims were obligated. Just trying to trim down on was and were. Oh my gosh, look at all this. The main thing I wanted to rewrite here is I had the wording was swiftly annihilated, which, just that word was. So just changed it, the Muslims swiftly annihilated the garrison instead of the garrison was swiftly annihilated. So I think that just makes it more, active instead of passive. And same thing, the wording coming out of, that just felt kind of amateurish. So it just changed it to exiting their houses. The word following there to start the paragraph, I think I have the word following somewhere else close by, so I kind of wanted to trim down on that word. Who had made landfall, there's a use of had I wanted to get rid of. Brought him straight to the gates of Rome. I thought that word straight was unnecessary. Brought him to the gates of Rome. Oh, and this is another thing I mentioned in my previous video. I had a lot of work trying to rewrite this sentence. Built almost 600 years earlier with nearly 400 defensive towers. I previously mentioned in a video how I rewrote this line or whatever to that for whatever reason I was fixing. But because of that, I realized I had repetition of almost. So built almost 600 years earlier, and then the paragraph below it, almost entirely. So there's repetition of almost. So I realized I could, get rid of it by, instead of built almost, it's built nearly. And then instead of nearly 400, changed it to close to 400. And then that way there's no, I think, repetition of almost. I think that was 11 feet thick. Just wanted to get rid of the was. And at the very bottom, Abdallah was at the forefront. Just changed it to moved, just to get rid of that. use of was. Oh goodness, look at all this. I don't think there's any edits I want to point out. It's just showing you guys how the edits look on the page. The use of was, he was quick, just got rid of it. And then at the end of the paragraph, he was needed, just cut it. Again, I also don't think I mentioned this one. I tend to repeat the word that kind of a bit. So that the Byzantines were. So just get rid of it. The Byzantines were. So that's definitely another word I've been on the lookout for. So that, was, had, definitely words I'm trying to trim down on. Oh, so for this part here, I wanted to get rid of using, I don't know how to say this, but like the kings and sultans, like numbers. So Murad the second, Muhammad the second, Bayezid the first. Just because, I don't know, I think it just kind of looks a little bit distracting. Always saying like, you know, one or two. So I just like cut it. So even though, you know, readers might potentially get confused thinking like, oh, so this is Murad the First or Muhammad the First, when like I do have both Muhammad the First and Muhammad the Second, you know, in this scene, you know, explaining what each one did. So, you know, hopefully just by context alone, readers will know which one I'm talking about. And a way I try to do that is like the first mention of them, you know, the most recent mention of them, I'll say which one I'm talking about, you know, Muhammad the Second. But then for every future reference to him, I won't say Muhammad the Second. I'll just say Muhammad. And then if I happen to go back to do like Muhammad the First, then I'll deliberately point out, you know, Muhammad the First or Muhammad's grandfather, you know, the first Muhammad or whatever. So it's just trying to let readers know contextually which one I'm referring to, but then generally, if I can, instead of saying one or two, just say Muhammad, Murad, Bayezid, whatever. And hope, you know, context alone will let readers know which one I'm talking about. Just a typo, and it's a little bit blurry, but as enjoys were often sent back, well, it's as envoys, not enjoys. So just a typo. Oh, so this is kind of neat a little bit, I think. So there's this historical character, Orhan Celebi, this character during the fall of Constantinople, historical character. Well, I have like several characters in this prologue, and I kind of show what each one was doing, but I didn't really say too much what this character Orhan was doing during the fall of Constantinople. Basically, all you see him do is he's like looking out at the water, at the Golden Horn. That's really all he does. So I looked him up to see like what was he actually doing during the battle. And there's two different accounts. There's like, you know, probably a more pro-Byzantine account where he's doing something more heroic, which was leading the defense of the seawall, which is like the north wall of Constantinople, like guarding the Golden Horn. And then there's the like pro-Turkish, pro-Ottoman account, which basically says, you know, the guy dressed up as a monk and tried to flee the city, which is kind of like the cowardly way out. So instead of choosing one or the other, I just went with both. So after leading the defense of the seawall or whatever, and then he dressed up as a monk and tried to escape the city. So I just used both of them. So yeah. Here you can see getting rid of another use of the word that, the man that they thought was Constantine, the man they thought was Constantine. It reads the exact same, so the word that is unnecessary. And then the word was, I just think this is passive, was moved, so just changed it to relocated. Gets rid of a was and hopefully of a passive sentence or passive wording. For this part, I got rid of this line, bumped her noggin, because I think later on in the book, I have a character, Ariel Geller, say that, oh, I bumped my noggin. So noggin is a really unique word, of course, and I really liked Ariel saying it because it just seems so endearing, because Ariel is also kind of like a younger woman, and the characters she is with, Schuyler and Cliff Cutler, are both like in their 60s. So I just really liked Ariel saying like, I bumped my noggin. You know, it just sounds so endearing to me. And so since I realized I had this character here, like in chapter 2 or whatever, say bumped her noggin, it would have just been repetition. So I didn't need to have this character here saying that. I mean, this is a really minor character, Rocco or Rocco. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's so bad I don't know how to pronounce my own character names. But yeah, since I realized it was repetition, I would much rather get rid of this line. So it's gone. Oh my goodness, look at all this. I think the thing I wanted to get rid of here is I have it was constructed. So that's passive wording. So just wanted to, change the sentence around to get rid of that. And then there's another one, tycoon who was the third wealthiest. So just get rid of it. Tycoon, the third wealthiest. Like I mentioned, saying like they looked and saw. So instead of they saw night, I just say night approached. And again, I kind of like words ending in ed just because of like the past tenseness of this book. So instead of they saw night approaching, I just say night approached. Oh my goodness. So use of the word that and a had. That had been gifted. So just get rid of it. So suit gifted to him by the government. And then instead of he flatly said, just changed it to he flatly answered because it's in response to a question. So I could have answered instead of said because I don't really mind the word said too much. Like that's one thing, even though I'm against repetition, I really don't like when writers go out of their way to avoid said. To me, said is fine. I mean, you don't want to use it like every single dialogue tag or whatever, but to me, I think readers just ignore the word said. I mean, it's a real common word. There's nothing wrong with said, but having other words like so and so observed, so and so inquired, so and so pointed out, so and so exclaimed, so and so shouted, so and so marveled, so and so, whatever. Those to me are much more distracting than just saying said. But in this case, I realize since it's an answer to a question, I could have it be answered instead of said. Here's a wording. It was constructed, so just trying to get rid of that. And yeah, that's a pretty messy sentence because I was just, there were probably several things I didn't want to do with it. So took some work to try to fix that. He had accrued, just get rid of it. He accrued. He was supposed to, just get rid of a was. He had, were operated by, had and were, so it sounds passive. The thing with like looked and saw, so it says looked small, well just say small. He had taken part, so he assisted. Oh, and then again, it's a little bit blurry, but not the part I want to point out. So an empty dish was upturned, so just changed it around a little bit to get rid of was. Oh, so right here, there's multiple uses of the word had and also multiple uses of the word back. How I say I tend to use directions a lot, up, down, left, right, front, back. So had and back multiple times on this page, so just getting rid of them. I think there's 4 uses of the word had in this page and 2 uses of back. So just trimming down on them. I don't try to get rid of every one. Like just looking at this now, I can see one plain as day. He had more or less permanently requisitioned. So, I don't really like do a word search for had and just get rid of every single one, even though now that I think about it, I might do that at the end of this book, like just to try to trim down on it even more, like just one more time going through and looking at every had, nothing else, but just doing a word search for had and getting rid of as many more as I can. But just based on this, this one page alone, getting rid of 4 hads or whatever. So that way it makes it so the other hads in the book are not as bad because instead of being like 800 of them, there may only be 200 of them or whatever. That's just like numbers thrown out of whatever, pulled out of imagination. So yeah, if I just cut down on these, I can afford to have some other ones. Because again, had is a real common word, but it's just a word that kind of bothers me. I notice it. And I am concerned if readers notice it, they'll be more looking out for the word had rather than actually reading and enjoying the book. You can see up at the top, there's a who was that I got rid of, there's a that I got rid of, and there's an up that I got rid of. Instead of decided to intervene, just change it to intervened, and then at the bottom you could see another had that I got rid of. If he really wanted to confess, I thought the word really was just kind of unnecessary and amateurish. He was recovering, were hurting less, headaches had subsided, so just getting rid of those unnecessary words. Which was covered, and then there's a which was lit up, and then there's another which that I wanted to get rid of and just change it to that. Oh, and then I think potentially because I changed that which to that, then there's a she chose that seat. So, since I have that one that, I wanted to get rid of the other that and just change it to the. And then at the bottom, there's a he was that I got rid of. Oh, now this part. So I was watching a video a couple days ago, and basically these guys were talking about how Turkish people and Muslims are really cruel to animals, especially dogs. And so when they said that, I was kind of like, because there's a real deliberate point in this book, Ottoman Destiny, where one of the things I say about the Turkish people is that they are really generous to cats, especially the people of Istanbul. And there's like a whole little storyline or whatever about how the Turks are really good to cats, and like shop owners and stuff put out bowls of cat food. And when you go into mosques, you'll see cats in there because they're just like stray cats and they've always lived in the city. So the Turks just live amongst the cats and just feed all these cats. And so that's something I try to say good about Turks, because this book, Ottoman Destiny, is really like a middle finger to Turkey and the Turkish government and President Erdogan and kind of the Turks as well. But I don't want it to just be all negative. So that's one positive thing I very deliberately included, was that, oh, well, the Turks are nice to cats. But then when I was watching that video and the guys started talking about how, like, Turks especially are really mean to dogs and stuff, it sort of made me think like, oh man, should I change Ottoman Destiny? Like, should I get rid of that where I have that whole thing about how they're good to cats? Because, I really wanted to kind of include that when they started talking about that. Like, oh, I could show that. I could show, Turks are just really cruel to animals. So I was really stumped what to do, because again, I really liked having that good part there, because again, I don't want it to just be like, oh, Turks are just all bad people. I want to have some good and some bad. So I was really thinking, what should I do about it? Like, should I go back and rewrite all those older scenes or what? But then I realized I have this scene with his character, William Barrett, and William Barrett does point out more negative things about Turks. So this whole paragraph here, it's just talking about like how badly kind of he dislikes the Turkish people and just how they're scammers and frauds and just like not good people. They're just, slimy people kind of. So that scene or whatever would fit here. So just like a little paragraph or a couple sentences where I just say like something like, he had also never seen anybody as cruel to dogs as Turks and whatever. And just say like some of the cruel things that they do to dogs in Turkey. And so yeah, I think it kind of fits this way because this other character I have, Ariel Geller, she talks more positive about the Turks, like just how generous they are, and all this stuff I talk about in other videos, and you could see in the book. So yeah, this way I still keep it both ways. So one person sees more good things about the Turks, and then this other character sees more bad things about the Turks. And so yeah, that scene about Turkish cruelty to dogs and stuff could go here. So yeah, maybe they are fairly decent to cats. I don't know. I don't really know any Turks in real life. So yeah, maybe they are nicer to cats and meaner to dogs. I don't know. For this little part here, it's really small, but I decided to add this line where Alfred Russell says, "I'm sorry to hear about your father's men." Basically, the previous day, a couple of the president's or prime minister's security staff were murdered. And even though, like in the previous scene, Alfred has already told this to Tugchi, he's said, like, I hope your father's okay or whatever. And so I just decided, since like that subject is still raised again, they're talking about the murders that happened the previous day. I just added another line where Alfred says, "Hey, I'm sorry about your father's men and I'm glad your father's safe." Because, Alfred is just empathetic. He cares about Tugchi. And, he's showing concern for her father, and a couple of her father's men were just killed. So that's a really frightening thing for her. So he's just showing empathy. So I just really like adding that. And also Alfred is definitely, he likes Tugchi, so he's being really considerate to her. So I just like adding this line. He was referring to, just change it to he referred. I think this line, just because there's a was because, and then there's also a were still, so just getting rid of those. Here on these couple pages, you could see there's a that I got rid of. There's a had that I got rid of. On the right side of the page, on the top left, there's a that I think that I got rid of. Lower down, there's a he was. Then the paragraph below it, there's an up with Anna and Dalal. I don't know. I never know pronunciation. But, directions, up, down, left, right. So get rid of that up with. Then there's a had that I got rid of, had shot down. And then there's, actually I leave this had, but toward the bottom, had still taken up arms. Still is another word that I tend to repeat a lot. But in this case, the had is okay there, but the still is unnecessary and just kind of repetitive for the rest of the book. Just a word I use a lot. So got rid of still. Oh, so for this scene here, I talked about this in the previous video to this one, I think. I had this scene where Mark and Jada, I didn't know when I was working on this book if these characters, Mark and Jada, if they were dating or if they were married. They are characters from the Samuel Creed series. Mark is the brother of Samuel Creed. And this book is set, I think, in 2013. And so I didn't know if they're married or not. So I just changed like all the references to whatever, Mark and Jada. Instead of saying Mark and his wife or Mark and his girlfriend, I just say Mark and Jada. Or whatever, Mark and his partner or whatever. But after doing this, I worked on the book Keeping Fire, which is set in 2009. Keeping Fire is a Samuel Creed book. And in that book, I actually had a scene where I do say Mark and Jada are married. So then I thought, okay, well, since I already changed Ottoman Destiny to just say, Mark and Jada, instead of Mark and his wife, I actually changed Keeping Fire to have them just being dating. But then I kind of got the idea that, well, hang on, I could actually have Mark propose to his girlfriend in that book, Keeping Fire, in 2009. So then I'd know, like, okay, so if they get engaged in 2009, they would definitely be married for this scene in Ottoman Destiny, like, 5 years later or whatever, 6 years later. So yeah, so now I know I can actually change this to Mark and his wife. So yes, they are married now. They get engaged in Keeping Fire in 2009 or whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of a, I don't know how to say, but it's just a process. So first I was working on this book and I didn't know if they're married or not. So I changed this book, Ottoman Destiny. Then I went to work on Keeping Fire. And since I made those changes to Ottoman Destiny, I was like, oh, I can't have them married in this book now in 2009. So I changed that book. And then I decided, no, actually they could get engaged in this book. So now I could go back and change this one again. So it's just a process. And, that may sound frustrating or whatever, but I enjoy doing that because I like having books connected this way. So yeah, it's a small thing, but I enjoy it. I just like having, these details. Oh my goodness gracious, look at all this. I'm not going to go through any of this, I think. Oh, except one thing I'll point out here is on the right side of the page, there's this line something, hearing her words and his own reverberating in his ears, hearing an explosion. I thought that was just really bad writing, so I wanted to rewrite it, and that actually took me quite a while to do. I was just having problems with it. I was struggling with it. So, yeah, I probably spent like half an hour or 45 minutes or something like that deliberating over how to write that line. Really struggled with it. I don't know why. It's just some sentences just, they stump me. So I was stumped on that for a while. I still don't know if I like it. Not always like this, he said, an explosion drowning out his words. Oh my goodness, here's more changes. I don't think I'm going to point out anything, maybe. You could see I kind of like circle these words here, I suppose, and then there's another I suppose, but I suppose you will have to deal with it, whatever. So just repetition of I suppose. So I just, read them both and just thought, which one do I want to keep more? So I got rid of the first one. Oh my goodness. So just like I say, and walked with him into, that just seems like kind of a mouthful. So just entering the parlor. There were reports. I thought that was just, there were seems, kind of amateurish and passive. Moving to the couch, they sat beside each other. It just seems like dull direction. Like that doesn't really add anything to the story. Moving to the couch, they sat beside each other. So I don't know. I mean, I know that's like, essential direction or whatever, but I don't know. I just don't like it. And then at the bottom, walked out to a podium. I just tend to use the word walked a lot and just directions. So, moving to the couch, they sat beside each other, walked out to a podium. I don't know. I just, try to sharpen that kind of wording up a little bit. Oh, so for this part here, I mentioned in a previous video, I have this font here that changes because the character is looking at a computer. So this is supposed to be like a computer type font. But I just realized it's kind of difficult to read, like the words blend together a little bit. So you can see this word that I circled in the middle of the paragraph, his attack was most successful. Well, that doesn't look like it's his attack. It looks like HS attack, because the I may be blending with either the S or the H. So yeah, I just need to either like increase the spacing for this font. If I can do that, I don't know. Or would I actually have to physically add a space between each word? Or am I just going to have to change the font altogether? But yeah, that word, his attack, how the words blend together like this, unless that's a typo, which I probably don't think it is. Unless I can fix that and just increase the spacing a little bit for this font, I'll just have to select a different font. I do like it though. I like having a different font appear in the book just because it looks different, and I don't know. As a reader, I like seeing this kind of stuff. Because sometimes, you could get bored just reading the same old thing, just words, 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 words. So if there's something different in the book, like, oh, here's a different looking font or whatever, or hey, this font is upside down, it kind of, snaps readers, back to focus, like, oh, wait, I actually need to pay attention. Something changed here. So I kind of like doing that in books, just, I think it helps readers just kind of keep them interested. It gives them something fresh. They never know what's going to come next. Like, what's going to happen next? Are the words just going to be like diagonal on the page or whatever? You never know. So, yeah, I just kind of like having that. But yeah, I definitely want to change this font if, the words so just blend together like that. Oh, so for this part, I have this character say Arbil, Hozat corrected. Well, when I was reading this, I was kind of like, Arbil, what city is that? And I thought it was this city Erbil, which is in Iraq. But I was also kind of doubting myself. I was like, Arbil, is that like actually a city in Iran or something? So I looked it up and yeah, so Arbil is the same as Erbil, the city in Iraq. It's kind of a Kurdish city. And the reason I think I went with the name Arbil instead of Erbil, Erbil is kind of like the, world famous name for the city or whatever. I mean, it's like the common name. Like on Wikipedia and Google Maps and stuff, it'll say Erbil. But I think what I did is Erbil is also like it comes, I think, from the Turkish language. So Arbil, I think, is kind of an Arabization of the name Erbil. So it's like an Arab version of Erbil, Erbil being more Turkish. And this book and this series kind of is a middle finger to Turkey. Kind of anything I could do in the book to offend Turks, I'm going to do that. And also, this book and series is really quite pro Kurdish. So, because of that, I went with the spelling Arbil instead of Erbil to be more of an Arab spelling rather than a more Turkish spelling. Well, then I thought, hang on, if Arbil is actually like the Arab spelling of Erbil, what is like the actual Kurdish name for it? So, would Kurds do a different name for this city? Because that's how it is. I mean, some cities have like an Turkish name, some cities have a Arabic name, and then they may also have a Kurdish name. The Arabs may call it one thing, the Turks may call it another, and the Kurds may call it another. And so between them, I really wanted to think like, well, since my books are kind of like a love letter to the Kurds, I should call Erbil by whatever the Kurds like to call it. And so what I did, I wanted to have this city name based on what the Kurds would like to call it. So since I like don't really know any Kurds in real life, what I actually did is I went on Facebook and I went to the page for the Erbil soccer team. So just on one of their posts, I said like, "Hey, I'm working on a book set in Iraq, and I'd like to know what would Kurds like to call the city? Like, if you could have your choice, what would you call it? Would you call it Erbil, Arbil, or I also looked it up, and the Kurdish name for the city is either Hewler or Holler." And so I asked them on that post in response to just like the Erbil soccer team, like, hey, which name do Kurds like most for the city? Like, if you guys had your way, what would you call the city? Erbil, Arbil, Hewler, or Holler? And it's kind of funny how it happened because I think I might have gotten 4 responses. And I think the responses were one said Erbil, one said Arbil, one said Hewler, and one said Holler. So it's like, well, that doesn't help me out. There's like no consensus. But at least it kind of lets me know that each one is common. So, I mean, they call it by all of those. So, no matter what I use, Erbil, Arbil, Hewler, or Holler, all of them are fine. So, I have this character say Hewler, Hozak corrected, the Kurdish name for the city of Erbil in Iraq. And then in the next paragraph or whatever, the character calls it Erbil. And then the other character goes right back. We were in Hewler for a very different reasons. So yeah, they call it different names. So that's what I think I'll do. But like for the map for the other book I'll do, Babylon Dithers, I think I will probably keep it with the name Erbil. So that will be like the generic name for it. But yeah, I'll probably in the book have it variously called Erbil, Arbil, Hewler, and Holler. I'll use all of them. And I may use them interchangeably as well. So yeah, it's a real small detail, but it's just something I like. And I do think it is important just because it's like, what would Kurds actually like to call the city? And, if you call it this, is that word appealing to a certain country, like the Turks or the Arabs or the Kurds or whatever? And the names we use for things are important. Like, for instance, for German Derelict, the first Trevor Knight book, I chose to rename like the body of water. Instead of the Persian Gulf, I call it the Arabian Gulf because if you call it the Persian Gulf, it's giving ownership of that body of water to Iran because of Persia. But instead, since I wanted to kind of give a middle finger to Iran, instead of calling it the Persian Gulf, I call it the Arabian Gulf. And so, yeah, instead of giving it to Iran, I give it to like the Saudis and stuff. I give it to the Sunnis. So, it's really small details, but it's just kind of realizing that the words you use are important. And even though these may just be standard names like Erbil or Persian Gulf or whatever, I can really, either subtly or obviously have a middle finger to someone just by changing the name, by calling it Hewler instead of Erbil, or the Arabian Gulf instead of the Persian Gulf. And so, yeah, kind of whenever I can, I give a middle finger to Iran and also to, the Turks and stuff, to Turkey. Really small thing, but hold on. See that little guy I added? Because originally, what's going on here is Trevor is in a Turkish prison, and Trevor is kind of like one of two sort of gang leaders. Like, Trevor has several different inmates and guards who are kind of loyal to him. And so there's this other character, this other guy who also has several inmates and guards kind of under his influence. I don't actually name him in the book. So you don't really get very much like detail or description about that guy at all. But for this scene here, this is supposed to refer to that guy. Hold on. See that little guy, full beard, white shirt? So Trevor is supposed to be pointing out like his rival, And so I just decided to give his rival some kind of like physical description instead of just, full beard. So I had him be a little guy, he's a scrawny little dude. So yeah, I just kind of liked having that. So Trevor, he is like 6'2", and Trevor has kind of a ally or a henchman who is like 7'2". So it's kind of like those two are kind of leading the prison, sort of. Trevor and then this like 7'2" behemoth. They kind of control most of the prison. So instead of having like Trevor's rival also be a large, intimidating guy, I thought it'd be cool or interesting or whatever if Trevor's rival is actually like a short, scrawny dude. So yeah, it's a really, really, really small detail, but I just kind of like it. And I also kind of like that contrast that like physically Trevor and his friend, like 7'2", they far like physically outmatch this other guy, but this other guy just, he's a little scrawny dude, but he does have some power. And, I think it may be that way sometimes where like the crime boss may be just a short, scrawny dude, maybe just a rich person or something. That's all they have. But then their muscle will be, the big guy with muscles. But the actual crime boss is a small, scrawny dude. So that's what I have here. The rival guy, gang leader, whatever, is a little scrawny guy. Extremely small detail, but I just kind of liked adding it. I don't really think I want to pause to show you guys any kind of like edits here. Just one thing I kind of want to point out just because I like it. So in this scene I've talked about in previous videos, what happens here is Trevor is escaping from the prison, and what happens is he like hijacks a truck. But then there's this action scene where basically what winds up happening is the brakes on the truck fail. And, that's a real common thing. Like, oh no, we're going downhill and there's no brakes. But so then what happens is Trevor like gets the truck turned around, but then the truck begins going backwards down the mountain. So I thought that would add like more intensity, like just instead of going down a mountain without brakes, they're going backwards down the mountain without brakes. But then I went one step further where then the steering wheel like just breaks off of the car. So they're in a truck going backwards down the mountain without brakes and without a steering wheel. So it's just a real crazy scene. And really the point of this scene is this scene happens in the middle of the book. So Trevor is going to survive this scene because it's the middle of the book. He's not going to die, clearly. So as a result, I think you can afford to play around with it more, because everyone's going to know he's going to survive. So there's not going to be a lot of tension. They're going to know, even if he gets caught or whatever, he's going to live. He's not going to die. Trevor has plot armor for this scene. So as a result, I kind of like, deliberately make it, comedic action. And so really this scene would be like straight out of Pirates of the Caribbean. So you would have like the Pirates of the Caribbean theme playing while all this like comedic action insanity is going on, going backwards down the mountain without brakes and without a steering wheel, and just things keep happening and it's just like crazy and it's like, oh my God. But what happens here, it's also just a funny little scene I added where this guy, Trevor's fighting with this soldier for control of the vehicle. And what this guy does is he rips off like an air freshener tree from the rear view mirror or whatever, and he mushes it into Trevor's face. And so, I thought that is just kind of funny where these guys are just fighting in this truck. They're punching each other, elbowing each other, whatever. They're trying to get any kind of advantage they can to, knock the other out or get the other guy out of the truck. And so they're looking for any kind of weapon they can. So they use an air freshener as a weapon. So I just thought that was funny. And originally I was going to have Trevor do it. Trevor mush the air freshener into this other soldier's face. But then I thought it'd kind of be funny if the guy actually did that to Trevor instead. So yeah, that's what happens is, the guy grabs the air freshener off the rear view mirror and just mushes it into Trevor's face and nose, gagging him with the air freshener. So it's just a really ludicrous scene and I just really like it. And yeah, like totally a Pirates of the Caribbean moment. Just like everyone knows this is not a dangerous scene, even though it's like pure crazy, insane action. Just like, what the hell is going on here? The book loses all seriousness here, but it's because he's not going to die. So as a result, I play with it, Why try to make readers think, oh my gosh, is Trevor going to survive? Readers know he's going to survive. So why beat around the bush? Just have fun with it. So I do. Oh, so for this part here, this is the map for Act 3 of the book, so we're kind of approaching the end here. In the act, I mentioned the city Konya several times, but I did not have it on the map, and the reason is because I think the city of Konya is actually like located a little bit further north. Like, I don't know exactly how much further north, but I think it might be, 50, 75 miles or something further north than this image would show. So I did decide, like, since I do mention it several times in this act, to just go ahead and put Konya on the map. So yeah, I think it is located probably, 50, 75, 100 miles, whatever, further north than I show on the map. But at least it's not too far north. So it's not like it's really 300 miles further north or 500 miles further north or whatever. So yeah, I just really wanted to have it on the map. So I do kind of fudge a little bit, but not too much. Oh my goodness, look at all that. Nothing I wanted to talk about, just kind of further fleshing some stuff out about the story. Nothing to talk about though. And same thing here, just fleshing it out some more. So this is another character in the book that I just wanted to flesh out a little bit. And also flesh out the story a little bit, the world building. Oh, so for this part here, you can see I circled seasickness because I hyphenated it. So I looked it up. Is seasickness supposed to be one word, two words, or should it be hyphenated? And apparently, I think seasickness should be one word. So this is not, I think, like an American or British spelling thing. And it's not just like a whichever one you want to do is fine. I think seasickness is supposed to be one word. So I just made a note for myself to word search seasickness with a hyphen and also, 1 and 2 words, and just make sure every use of seasickness in the book, there's probably only like, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's just one. I don't know. But, just to check and make sure that if I do have the word at all, it's going to be one word. For this scene here, this is kind of a product of just like this being probably like the 10th time I've been through this scene or whatever. So what happens here is Kate kind of goes on an anti-male rant. And, that's really consistent with the book. I just have like several anti male rants in my books, especially from Kate and stuff. And I think a couple other characters may do it as well. I mean, Trevor does it a little bit as well. But, I just kind of realized, this being like however many times I've gone through this book, just reading this scene now, it's like, this scene is just not funny. Like this little tangent they go on, like, whatever, like, you're damn dirty apes, Kate says about men. I just realized after this time through the book, I was like, none of this is funny. None of it adds to the characters. I do plenty of other scenes like this elsewhere in my books. So I just don't think I need this little scene or whatever, this little exchange of dialogue. This exchange of dialogue is just stupid and it's not funny. So I just got rid of it. I guess just like top left, there's a there were, and then there's a which was, and then sort of middle lower down, there's another that were. So just, getting rid of those. And then at the bottom, was approaching, just change it to approached. Oh, so this part, this is just kind of a rant. I have heard people pronouncing this country as Qatar or also Cater, and I looked it up, and that is not how you should pronounce it, like ever. It's not Qatar, and it's not Cater. I can't really do the exact like Arab, local Arab pronunciation because I would just sound like a clown. But the correct pronunciation of this country is like Qatar. I used to say in the past Qatar, and yeah, even though it's not Qatar, it's guitar. Qatar is at least closer than Qatar or Cater. So a lot of people say it that way and they are wrong. It's not Qatar, it's not Cater, it's guitar. But it's basically with a G, guitar. Usually I don't really mind stuff like this. I mean, it's just like, whatever. Pronounce it however you think it should be pronounced. Like I don't say Kiev, I say Kiev. I don't say Moscow, I say Moscow. I don't say Roma, I say Rome. So I think that's fine, but people are flat out wrong when they say cater or cutter. That's not what it is. It's guitar. I mean, even if we're not quite pronouncing it right, just that's the closer way to say it is guitar. I will die on this hill. It bothers me. Oh, so for this scene here, I decided to add this line because basically this is a scene with Beati and they're talking about all these different countries reacting to their possible invasion of Cyprus. And so they're talking about Sweden. So I thought, has Beati ever been to Sweden? And my character, Beati, the president of Turkey, he is basically based on Erdogan, the real president of Turkey. And I mean, there's like no, qualms about it. I mean, basically, Beati is Erdogan. And so I just looked it up. Has President Erdogan ever been to Sweden? And so I said, yes, he went to Sweden like in 2008 or something, and he talked with the king about Turkey joining the European Union, which perfectly fits in with this scene. So I just added a line of dialogue where Beati says, when I visited Sweden 5 years ago, I met with the king and whatever. He was positive about our admission to join the European Union. So yeah, it's just a little bit of, I don't know. It's a reference to real life. Erdogan visited Sweden and they were pretty supportive of him. And that's kind of how it is in this book is Sweden is kind of supporting or in more support of Turkey's possible invasion of Cyprus. So yeah, just a real little detail I decided to work in. So yeah, Beati has been to Sweden because Erdogan has been to Sweden. Oh my goodness, look at all this. The main thing I wanted to change here, this is pretty ridiculous, but workers from the Menace toss buoys over the side and then they like pull the Menace to the pier by hand, it says that very clearly. They guided the boat by hand. But then I realized the Menace is like I don't know how big exactly, but it's like, 200 feet, 300 feet, 150 feet or something. I mean, it's like a big metal ship. So this isn't just like a, 15-foot boat or whatever. This is a, 300-foot ship or something. So I just kind of thought, like, can they pull this ship by hand? I don't know. I mean, I don't really know like the physics of that. So I mean, maybe there is some way, whatever. I don't know. But I just thought, this is a multi-ton ship. So would they be able to pull it by hand, even like three of them? I don't know. So I just decided to cut that because just thinking about it, I was like, you know, I don't think they would be able to move the ship by hand. It's 300 feet. So, yeah, just got rid of it. Kind of ridiculous thinking about it. Oh my goodness, look at all this. What I have here, basically, I won't go through it, of course, but the text sort of on the right side of the page, like middle way on the right, that is like the start of this new line or whatever. And so it goes all the way down the right side of the page, and then I have a little arrow kind of pointing left on the bottom. And so that little block of text on the bottom left of the page, on the right side of the page, on the bottom left there, that is like the continuation of that paragraph. So that's like the second part of that paragraph. And then I have a line cutting all the way through the page, pointing up to the top of the page. And that would be actually the end of that line or whatever, that new paragraph. So that's like all one new paragraph. So yeah, a lot of words there for a final draft too. Oh, and actually, I guess I'll kind of explain what I have here, why I have this, is because what happens in this scene is Kate says something like if she could snap her fingers or whatever and know about any other previous civilization, she says it would have been the Mycenaeans, the Greeks. But I was like, I knew I either wanted it to be the Mycenaeans or the Minoans, because I know one of them, they were a pretty significant empire or civilization, but we don't really know that much about them. So at the time when I wrote that, I didn't like research it to fact check it. I was just like, it's either the Mycenaeans or the Minoans. So I just wrote the Mycenaeans. If there's anyone I could know about, it'd be the Mycenaeans. But we already kind of know a little bit about the Mycenaeans because they kind of came after the Minoans. And so, yeah, it's the Minoans we do not really know about. And so the Minoans used to live like on Crete or Crete or whatever it is. And so the myth of the Minotaur and stuff, that's kind of like from the Minoans. And we don't really know about the Minoans in part because like we have not actually, I think, been able to decipher their language yet. And so anyway, for this scene, Kate is kind of going off on sort of a historical lecture slash rant, which is very consistent with Kate's personality. Kate, in a way, is kind of like a know-it-all. So she'll just kind of begin just ranting about all sorts of things about history or science, about medical stuff, about biology, about religion, about politics, about like sexism or feminism or whatever, about witchcraft. Kate loves to rant. She kind of just loves to like share her knowledge. And so yeah, I since I kind of got it wrong, I said Mycenaeans instead of Minoans. I changed it, but instead of just saying like just saying Minoans, I did some research, and so I actually like came up with more of a rant or lecture about Kate just going on and on talking about like the Minoans and linear A and linear B and like Neolithic Greeks and stuff. And yeah, so she's just kind of going off on this lecture. And yeah, so that's just like classic Kate. And for this next image here, which is the continuation kind of that scene, Kay says, my knowledge of history begins to peter out after the Victorian era. Well, I based the character Kate off a friend I used to have, like a very dear friend of mine. And yeah, so I mean, Kate is really like my old friend. Like, my friend used to go on these kind of historical rants and stuff, and also like political rants. And my friend was also like a witch. He was a Wicca, and just a real dear friend of mine. And so, yeah, Kate is like exactly based off this friend I used to have. Unfortunately, that friend kind of drifted away from me. Basically, like, our political views were inseparable or whatever to him. Like, basically he could not stand me. He could not tolerate me because of my views. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know if this is the right word for it, but it's sort of like an unrequited love kind of thing. Because I was just like very fond of this guy, even though like, you know, we were vastly disagreed on things, especially politics. We'd get in all sorts of arguments and stuff about politics. But in spite of that, I was really fond of the guy. I liked him a lot. And so, yeah, it's just sort of sad that, we went our separate ways, but just a real dear friend to me, someone I was really fond of. And so the character Kate is based on him. And he even knew that, like, so for some scenes, they would be like directly things that he would say or experiences he had that I would put in my books, and he knew this, because I was telling him like I got to use this in a book. So yeah, but anyway, this was also something about like that friend of mine. So I mean, this was probably like a direct line from him about saying his knowledge of history, kind of ended after the Victorian era, because to him everything until then was interesting, and that was all like historical until then. But everything after the Victorian era to him is just like modern history, and it just gets boring because it's just like whatever modern political history or whatever, and it's just a lot less interesting. So yeah, he knew like everything about everything before the Victorian era. But if you ask him something about like the 1970s, he'd probably not really know so much. But if you ask him about like the 1470s or the whatever, the 1070s BC, he would know. And so, yeah, I just kind of added that line. My knowledge of history begins to peter out after the Victorian era. So, yeah, that's just another sort of characteristic of that friend of mine, was that, after that point, his history kind of becomes shaky. And it's the same way with Kate. Oh, and I've showed this in several videos as well, but I just have this line that I like, or this part of the book. Step, 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 step. So this is something I took from a German writer and illustrator named Walter Moors. He does this in one of his books, something just like this. So I wanted to use it in one of my books as well. So yeah, I just love doing that. And so, yeah, it's a tribute or whatever to Walter Moors. I'm not going to claim originality for this. This is entirely something I ripped off of Walter Moors, and I just like it. I think it looks funny and looks cool. And like I said earlier about like you never know what'll come next with like different kind of font and everything. So it just it gives readers something different to look at and just makes them think, oh, this is new. And I think it helps readers kind of pay attention. It rewards them for making it this far into the book. It's like, wow, I have never seen a book do this before. So I just like having that. But yeah, I use this from Walter Moors. So yep, all credit to him. You don't really see it in this image, but in this scene, I have these Turkish military guys, and a lot of times they're referring to this Turkish frigate, and they'll say something like, have the frigate or have the ship or whatever. That's how they refer to this other ship. But I kind of realized they should just call the ship by what it is. The ship is the Kemal Reis or whatever. So instead of just saying like, have the frigate do this, they just call it by its name, because to them, the ship would be kind of personal to them, you know? The ship has a name. They know the name of the ship. So they would just say the ship's name. So that's a real small detail. But then also what I decided to add, I had this line like something, have the Kemal Reis destroy that lifeboat. What's happening here is the Turks attack this American ship, but then the crew gets away onto this lifeboat. And so the military here, this general, tells this other guy, like, send an F-16 to destroy that lifeboat. But then I realized, hang on, there's this other ship, the Kemal Reis, just like a mile away or something. So I just thought, why wouldn't you just have the Kemal Reis sink that lifeboat or whatever? So yeah, I just added that where this general does say, have the ship destroy the lifeboat. But at the same time, he does also say, have, you know, send an F-16 or whatever to destroy the lifeboat. And the reason I have that is because he's talking with his air marshal who has to make a decision. Like, the air marshal basically says, you know, no, I'm not going to have the Air Force do that. So because of that, I didn't just eliminate that scene or whatever. You know, instead of just having the general guy say, have the ship destroy the lifeboat, he still says, you know, send an F-16 or whatever to destroy it. And the air marshal guy says, no, I'm not going to do that. But still, at the same time, I had to insert the line where the guy says, you know, just have the ship destroy the lifeboat. So, yeah, so that way I realized it was just like an oversight or whatever. I have this Turkish ship just a mile away, and he didn't order it to destroy the lifeboat. Why? You have it right there. The ship will be able to destroy it much quicker than an airplane. So, yeah, just something I wanted to add. Just wanting to get rid of was. His father was a textile worker who, whatever, so his father labored in a textile mill. And then getting rid of name, instead of Inonaglu's father, just say he. Oh, and also nothing to point out here, no red marks. But I really like this little line of dialogue or whatever, because there's really no dialogue tags. It's just dialogue. And I like that because, I don't know, it's just whatever. So yeah, I just kind of like this little scene where it's just pure dialogue, mostly. I guess the thing I want to point out here is this red pen stuff. I think it's actually all supposed to be one block of text or whatever, but I was just having to fit it in. But what happened here is I'm having this scene where these Turks are talking, and they're talking about the planes that Turkey flies. So it mentions the F-4, which I think is called the Phantom II. That's like an American jet made in the 1970s, I think. And then they also fly F-16s, which is totally real. And then I thought, well, does Turkey have F-35s now? And so I looked it up, and I knew that Turkey was making their own version of an F-35. In fact, I think they're like pretty much finished with it, and it's beginning to, like, you know, get into production now. But I looked it up. Do they have F-35s? And no, they do not. And basically what Turkey decided, they had to decide whether they wanted F-35s or S-400s. S-400s are like a Russian, like, surface-to-air missile system. And so, yeah, basically they had to decide which one they wanted, because both Russia and the United States do not want Turkey to have both weapons, F-35s and S-400s, because then Turkey would be able to find out basically if F-35s could be shot down by S-400s, or if F-35s are invulnerable to S-400s. Because basically whichever way it goes, you could find out which one is the superior weapon, and that would, you know, both nations don't want that known. You know, if the American F-35s can get shot down by S-400s, the Americans don't want people to know that. And then if S-400s cannot shoot down F-35s, Russians wouldn't want people to know that. So Turkey had to choose which one they wanted, F-35s or S-400s. So they decided to go with S-400s. So they do not have F-35s. So this is like all real stuff. So as a result, they began making their own F-35s, which I mentioned in the book. They talk about that, how their 5th generation plane is getting close to being finished. And so ultimately, why this is going to matter is because in Atlantis Dislodged, Turkey is basically going to go to war with Israel. So in that war, Israeli planes might be getting shot down by S-400s, a very real weapon that Turkey does have. And the Turks might be flying instead of just F-4s and F-16s, they might have that other fifth generation plane that's, just right around the corner for them. So, yeah, so it's just a little bit of world building, I guess. So, yeah, Turkey does not have F-35s. They have their own, like, self-made fifth generation plane, and they do have S-400s from Russia. So also kind of as a smaller, like subtle piece of world building, I don't say this explicitly in the book, but they went with a Russian weapon system instead of the American weapon system. So what it kind of shows is that Turkey is kind of beginning to side more with Russia and China instead of the United States and stuff and the West. So Turkey is kind of becoming, you know, an opponent of the United States and Europe. They're kind of aligning a little bit more with Russia and China, both in real life and also in this book. But I also kind of exaggerate that a little bit because, Turkey is pretty much the bad guys of the series. So I kind of exaggerate that a little bit. For this line here, Trevor says, like, I had a free night stay at a pretty little Air Force base in the north. Well, I realized that wording, pretty little, it's has two meanings. So pretty little could just mean small, oh, it's a pretty little base, a small base, which was clearly not the intention. The intention was to have him be, oh, a charming base. So I got rid of that pretty little because I just realized like readers may just read that as small, even though the base is small. That's not what Trevor's supposed to be saying. So a nice stay at a charming Air Force base. So yeah, just sort of fixing that. Oh, so for this scene here, it'd be kind of difficult to explain, but it's a real easy thing. That line of dialogue, that paragraph, we should clean up, Kate said. That whole line is, of course, from Kate, but then the very next line of dialogue, Trevor, she said, that would have been Kate as well speaking. So it would have been, a Kate paragraph followed by another paragraph with a Kate piece of dialogue. So as a result, I wanted to move that Trevor up to the previous paragraph. So it would have said, like, in preparation for boarding, Trevor, she said, but I didn't want to have it that way because, I just, again, this would be too long to explain, but, basically the paragraph would begin with dialogue and then with narration, then with dialogue with Trevor, and then with narration with she said. And so I don't like to have that. I don't know if you're really supposed to have that. I think you should, like, if you're going to have that in a paragraph, you should have like dialogue and then narration and then dialogue. You don't do dialogue, narration, really. It just kind of looks messy. So I just kind of decided, since I couldn't really have that and I didn't want to have like she said Trevor, to get rid of that issue, I just kind of realized like I just don't need these lines at all. Trevor, she said, So, in preparation for boarding, after a quiet contemplation, she said, I'm thinking of staying. So it's all just one paragraph. So yeah, real complicated way to explain it for a really simple thing. Oh, exactly what I mentioned. He looked away and it's just unnecessary. He considered his options. I don't need to say he looked away and considered his options. Saying he looked away and does nothing to add to the characterization or to add to the scene, to add to the storytelling. It's just a useless, empty gesture and it's just unnecessary words. So he considered his options. Oh my goodness, look at all this. I don't think I want to explain all of that. That's just adding more like details in the book, just adding another little scene or moment or whatever. For this scene here, Trevor says something about how they do not have their passports. Well, I decided to add this little scene where that is true. They do not have their passports right now. And the reason is because their passports would have been on this ship that was destroyed. And so I realized that since this is true, Kate would kind of like remember like, oh crap, yeah, when our ship was destroyed, I lost my passport. And Kate really kind of blames Trevor for their ship being destroyed. So she would realize in this moment that all of her passport stamps, and it says down on the bottom like Mexico, France, Monaco, and so on, all these places that she's been. And so she just realizes, like, damn, I lost my passport, all my passport stamps, all these countries I've been to, and it's gone, and it's because of Trevor. And so she just kind of would look at Trevor and just be like, damn you, Trevor, like, oh. And so, first off, I realized since this is true, they did lose their passports on their ship, that Kate should have a reaction to that because she lost something that was special to her. She lost all her passport stamps, and she's going to blame Trevor for that and kind of hold it against him. So that's one thing. And then for another thing is all of these countries that it mentions, like in this book and previous books as well, both Trevor Knight books and Samuel Creed books, you see and hear about Kate's visits to some of these countries. Like in Keeping Fire, there's a scene where Kate talks about how she and her brother Sam went to France and then they went down to Monaco, and she tells a story about what happened with them in Monaco. So, this is not really just like a throwaway line where it says, her passport stamps to Monaco. Like, you find out more about Kate's time in Monaco in one of the Samuel Creed books, Keeping Fire. So if you read that scene, you'll realize like why that passport stamp would kind of be special to her. What happened in Monaco. And then in that same scene in Keeping Fire, she also mentions that she has seen some pretty bad jails down in Mexico. You don't know anything else about it, but there's another story in itself right there. But here you see that, passport stamps to Mexico. So there's there must have been a lot that happened there, especially if she wound up in a jail. So yeah, I just realized when I had that line where Trevor says we don't have our passports that, Kate should have a reaction to that because she would realize like, oh, damn, that's another thing I lost when our ship was destroyed. I lost my passport. I lost all my passport stamps. And so she would just kind of look at Trevor and just kind of be like, damn you, Trevor. Like, oh man, I lost something very important to me. And so I just really like adding that little scene here. Another small detail, there's this character here. He's like a military veteran. He's an Air Force, not a pilot. He's actually like one of the guys in the back controlling all this stuff. But he lost like, his wingman basically. And so he has the guy's dog tags or whatever. And then I just kind of realized, like, well, why does he have the dog tags? Shouldn't it go to the guy's wife or whatever, the guy's widow? And so, yeah, I added this line where this guy says, like, hey, these dog tags should go to his wife. So, he kind of holds them for a little bit, just, kind of saying farewell to his friend or whatever. But then he, gives them back and says, hey, give these to his wife. And I don't actually know if they do that in the military. Like, do they give the dog tags to the family or do they just like dispose of them or what? I don't know. And I don't really want to look it up. And it's a real small detail. And I don't really care one way or the other. I think just in the book, the dog tags should go to the widow. Even if like in real life, if they were to like keep them or whatever or destroy them, in this case I think it's better just to like give them to the wife, give them to the widow, because people would expect that. Oh, so I actually just wanted to look it up. So I looked up Google, do widows get a soldier's dog tags? So it says, no, a widow does not typically receive a soldier's original dog tags. The original set remains with the soldier and is not reissued. However, the family of a deceased service member usually receives a set of the original dog tags. If the originals are lost, a replica can be made. So yeah, they do get some kind of a set, but yeah, so it's a little more confusing than this. So it may not be like the original dog tags. Maybe it's a copy of them or something. I don't know. But, I don't want to have all that detail. I suppose I could add a little line where it says, the original dog tags stay with the guy, but this other pair is, you know, whatever. But I don't really think that's essential. So I just have it where he just gives them to the wife. Another real small detail. So there's a scene where Kate has serpent bracelets. In the start of the book, Kate actually gives away her serpent bracelets to like a child. And so I realized, like, well, hang on, does she have serpent bracelets now? Like a month or two has passed since that scene. So she may have like gotten new serpent bracelets. You know, Kate is like a witch and she has stuff like that, that kind of jewelry and stuff. So that's like her common jewelry. She always tends to wear serpent bracelets. Trevor and Kate are reuniting after a month or so apart. And when they first meet, Trevor sees that she did not have a serpent bracelet, her serpent bracelet on her wrist. And I say, like, he didn't realize that, you know, she gave it away, you know, earlier in the book. He wasn't there for that. He didn't witness that. But, you know, I kind of realized, like, well, hang on, maybe she has a new pair, but, you know, maybe they're different than her old serpent bracelets. But there's also the scene where they reunite, just like maybe the day before this, and he sees that she doesn't have any bracelets on. She doesn't have her serpent bracelet. So, however I do it, I want to make sure it's consistent. I could simply say, like, he looked at her wrist and saw that she had a new serpent bracelet instead of the one she used to have, which would make sense because she gave the old ones away. But still, there's the earlier scene where when they first meet, she doesn't have a serpent bracelet. And she wouldn't have been able to buy one like in the meantime between then and now. So it's kind of like if she has them at all, she should have them in that previous scene, just like the previous day or whatever. So yeah, I don't know exactly what I'll do for that. So I might just delete this, or if I do decide to add that, I might change it so in the other scene when he looks at her wrist or whatever, instead of seeing she doesn't have her serpent bracelet, maybe he just sees then that she has a new pair of serpent bracelets. And so then for this scene here, she can have serpent bracelets again. You know, I don't need, you know, it's not a plot hole or whatever. So, it's just a lot of words to explain. For the previous scene where they meet, like just the previous day, I may change that to say, like, he sees that she has a different bracelet than she used to have. For this scene here, I have this line where she glances upward to the hemisphere of the brain that's supposed to be used for accessing truthful information or whatever. I looked this up because this is a popular myth. Like if you look to one side of your brain, you're accessing the creative portion of your brain, which means you're telling a lie. Or you could look another way, and that means you're accessing basically the memory portion of your brain, which means you're telling the truth. Well, I looked it up, and apparently that is myth. That is not real, apparently. I mean, I don't know how real that is, but that's just what I read, is that no, that's a popular myth, but it's not true. So I have it in a couple parts in this book where that happens, where characters look up to the truthful side of their brain or the imaginative portion of their brain. And so yeah, I just deleted those references or whatever because, you know, apparently that is not true. Oh my gosh, look at this. What happens here is there's this scene where Trevor has a nightmare where he sees several dead people, basically, like people he used to know. And Trevor is kind of feeling guilt about these people's deaths. And in this dream, they're all kind of questioning him, like, you know, why did you kill us? Why did you let us die? And all this stuff. Just this really, you know, gruesome kind of stuff, a real vivid, you know, dream he's having. Trevor has had some pretty traumatic experiences and, you know, he's kind of messed up in the head. And so what I realized here, I think, is there's like 4 corpses in the dream, but I think originally I only mentioned 2 or 3 of them. So I had to create, you know, come up with another corpse that he sees. And so originally, like on the right, you could see there's a blue-eyed Syrian, but I decided instead to have it be this other person. So yeah, originally he saw only 3 dead people, but then it says there's 4 of them. So just a mistake. And then for this next image here, the continuation of that scene, now I think there's 6 of them, and they all I wanted to have them all have a line of dialogue. So, how many more will die because of you? How many others did you fail to save? And then I realized I had repetition. How many more will die? And then below that, a little ways, how many more have to die? So I want to give each one of these people their own line of dialogue. So just coming up with different lines. Why don't you care that we're dead because of you? One of them says, do you have no remorse for what you've done or whatever? So just trying to give each one their own line. Nothing to point out here, I think, just showing you guys edits to the book. More edits to the book. For this line here, spoke Sankar. Sankar is the Minister of Defense, and what he's doing is he's talking to Gokhan, who is the son of the president, and also the president is like in this scene with them. So, the president is overhearing this. So I just kind of realized for this line of dialogue, you underestimate our Air Force, and then he kind of goes on. Well, this line of dialogue is kind of going back after Gokhan because Gokhan raises this point. And so this general kind of snaps back at him that, basically like, oh, you're wrong. But I kind of realized that Sankar, the Minister of Defense, would not really be the one to say this line of dialogue because Sankar, I don't want to exactly say he's a kiss up or whatever, but Sankar is trying to stay on these guys' good side, the president and Gokhan's, because Gokhan is the son of the president. So Sankar is a little bit more, neutral. He's trying to be on these guys' good side. So I didn't think Sankar would have this line of dialogue kind of snapping back at Gokhan. But there is another general in this scene. His name is like Mafutagu or something like that. And earlier in this book, just like a couple days before this scene, Gokhan actually punched that general, Mufutagu or whatever. So that guy, that general, he would have the personality where he would go back after Gokhan. He would tell him like, no, you're wrong. So that general, he does not like Gokhan. Even though like Gokhan's father, the president, is listening in on this, still that general, he does have the mentality where he would snap back at Gokhan. So I just chose to give this line instead of Sankar to this other character, Mafutagu, and instead of like writing it in there like just above Sankar, I just circled up at the top of the page. There's a use of that character name Mafutagu or whatever, and so I just drew an arrow to Sankar. So I'm just telling myself spoke Mafutagu or whatever. So just copy and paste that name and put it down there by Sankar instead. I think this is the same scene maybe where Gokhan actually addresses his father as Mr. President instead of father, because this is like an official meeting. Like they're talking about the invasion of Cyprus, all these like military officials and the top members of the president's cabinet and all that, they're all together in a formal meeting. So I thought it'd be pretty impersonal or informal or whatever if Gokhan calls his father or dad or whatever. I mean, this is an official meeting. This is a really important meeting. So I thought Gokhan should be more formal here. So he calls his father Mr. President, Gokhan formally said. So yeah, he's just being more professional. So it's not like this is just nepotism, where Gokhan is only in this room because he's the son of the president. He is showing the president the respect he deserves. It's not just father, it's Mr. President. He's showing him that respect because this is a high level meeting. So I just thought that was a good little character decision, whatever, to be more formal, to call him Mr. President instead of calling him father. For this line here, I realized I had two sentences starting with she. She muttered to herself, and then she asked, have you, whatever. So the way I got rid of it is just by making it one sentence. She muttered to herself a phrase in Gaelic, complaining about him, then inquired, have you made any progress, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it just gets rid of having two sentences start with she. Oh, and so for this line, I decided to cut this line, he chuckled, you're such a whore. Without context, that line seems really incendiary or whatever, really offensive. You're such a whore. But if you just know these characters and contextually how these characters interact, Trevor is not saying that maliciously. And that's why originally I put in he chuckled. So you'd know he's not saying this maliciously. He's just like, you're such a whore, is, how he's kind of saying it. But I kind of decided I don't think I need that, because if you know how these characters interact, you should know Trevor is not saying this maliciously. He would not do that. They're not fighting here. And so, yeah, I thought that he chuckled line was just kind of unnecessary, even though without knowing the context, Trevor would just look like an asshole saying this, you're such a whore. Like, oh my God, this guy calling this woman a name. But, he knows Kate's not going to take offense to this, and she doesn't. She says, I'm damn proud of it. And yeah, so because of that, I just don't think I need that he chuckled part. The he chuckled, I really had it just to try to let readers know he's not saying this seriously. But readers should know he's not saying it seriously. Same thing I was talking about with the brain thing. Her eyes went up to the analytical, or his eyes went up to the analytical side of his brain. Just get rid of it. Myth, not real. I guess you could see there's a couple uses of had here. Kate had requested. Kate had also created. Oh, then there's also this line and logged in via a passcode instead of a face scan. Because basically for this scene, Trevor is in Northern Cyprus. Northern Cyprus is like part of Turkey, owned by Turkey. And Trevor is really on bad terms with Turkey. Like he fought a battle against them earlier in the book, and then he was in a Turkish prison, which he escaped from. So Trevor is actually kind of like a fugitive from Turkey. And in this scene, what's kind of happening is Trevor is beginning to do like medical humanitarian work on a Turkish military base, which is like an insanely risky thing for him to do. And there's a lot more backstory to it. Like this is a concern. Like they talk about this, like, I'm not sure he should be here. So that is definitely a part of the story. And there's a reason kind of why he's going there, like, taking a risk going there. But they have this tablet where the way you check in is to do a face scan. So you look at it and the tablet will, identify your face, and that's how you log in. And so I have a line where Trevor kind of says, he doesn't want to do that. And so, originally I kind of just skipped over that. I don't really say definitively if he does that or not, if he winds up doing that. But instead, I decided to just add a part here where it says how Trevor logs in via a passcode instead of a face scan. So yeah, that's just really a small thing, because basically, even though Trevor is on this base in, this Turkish base, when he's basically a fugitive from Turkey, he doesn't want to just go around broadcasting that he's there, really. So that's why he decides to log in with a passcode instead of a face scan. But then you could see there's a was that I got rid of. A comment was posted. So I got rid of it by just saying Gokhan read a comment posted to whatever. And then I talk about this in other videos, how Trevor is using all these different names on this tablet. So you can see there, Dr. Henry Jekyll, that's Trevor. Dr. Henry Jekyll is now Mr. Hyde. Again, that's Trevor. Mr. Hyde is now Samus Aran. So Trevor keeps changing his like username for the tablet. And so Samus Aran is the protagonist from the video game Metroid. And that's kind of a reference to Trevor being a gamer. But like the Dr. Henry Jekyll thing, Trevor is kind of self-conscious that he is only Mr. and Kate is a doctor. So you could see like on the username there, Dr. Kate Creed, she uses doctor instead of just Kate Creed. And Trevor, even though he kind of is playful about that, he teases her for that. I think Trevor is really kind of a little bit self-aware and, self-conscious or whatever, that, she is a doctor and he is not. He is just Mr. Knight. And so even though he kind of pretends like, to play it off and be humorous about it, I think it does kind of bother him a little bit, and he is petty about it. So I decided to also add this line here where he changes his name yet again. Instead of just being Samus Aran, he changes it. Samus Aran is now Dr. Samus Aran. So yeah, he just has to be petty. Like, he just has to have that doctor part in there. He's just so petty about it. Oh, so for this part here, kind of what I wanted to point out is what's basically happening is Gokhan, who is kind of like a weapons manufacturer, he also built this like electric vehicle, and then he kind of goes on a rant with Kate, and Gokhan kind of says how electric vehicles are kind of a scam for all these various reasons he lists. And one of them he says is like to have the lithium for the batteries for electric vehicles, these lithium mines just like tear up the earth. Like, seriously, look up images of lithium mines. They're just, terrible what they do to the earth. And also, like, for the lithium mines, they may have like slave labor or child labor to mine the lithium or whatever from these mines. And so it's just something that like electric vehicle users like just conveniently ignore. Like, they think they're saving the earth, but like, oh, just totally ignore lithium mines and the slave labor at the lithium mines and whatever. Just ignore all that, I'm saving the earth. And so Gokhan is kind of saying that even though he built this electric vehicle. And well, anyway, what I have here is I added this line where Kate kind of pushes back at him, and she says like, well, if you built this electric vehicle, you're contributing to that same thing. You're contributing to these lithium mines and this slave labor. And so basically, Kate is kind of pushing back at Gokhan, kind of challenging him. So in the book, basically, Gokhan becomes Kate's love interest in the book, and she falls in love with him pretty quickly. But at the same time, I don't want it to be so completely like insta love. So, in her, as part of her personality, Kate like continually challenges Trevor. She's always kind of pushing back at him, because that's how Kate is. Kate is not really just like a complete insta love, fall head over heels in love with someone. Even though she does develop feelings for Gokhan pretty quickly, in the same way, just as she'll push back against Trevor, she pushes back against Gokhan, and she also does it like elsewhere in this book. In fact, elsewhere in this scene. So it's not like she just completely swoons over this guy. She does push back at him. So she does say like, well, hey, if these lithium mines are so bad and child labor is so bad, by building this car, you're contributing to that. And in this scene, she also says, like, you're a weapons manufacturer. You're making weapons, so you are responsible for these airstrikes and stuff. So do you just not care about that, You don't care about these deaths. So she does push back at him, and I like that because it's her character being consistent, where even though she does like Gokhan, she pushes back at him. She challenges him, and she wants to see how he reacts to it. So I just really like that. So this line here I thought was just kind of excessive wording. I recently read about some of the work that's been going on to make portable ones. So I just tried to cut down on it. I recently read about the development of portable MRIs. So I think it just, cuts down on the words, makes it more concise. Right here, I realized I had repetition of team. My team can manage, and then just the line beneath it, check in with my team. So I changed the first one to crew. My crew can manage here. So, yep, just trying to get rid of repetition of team. Oh, and then there's this line here where I say justify. So you could see this font here is like left aligned. So I think this is just a problem. Like whenever I hit enter after come with me, it probably changed it. So it turned the font from justified to left aligned. I don't know exactly why it does that, but I'm actually really glad I spotted this because this is like the end of the act. So it'd be really easy to miss because also I just don't really look for like the alignment. It's just not something I would usually look for or notice. And it's a short paragraph. So I'm kind of glad I was able to spot this. So yeah, I just need to make sure I justify this final paragraph of the book. And actually, since this is the last line of Act 3, this is actually the last edit of the book. So yeah, that is it for the edits of Ottoman Destiny. Anyway, that is it for the final draft, I believe, of Ottoman Destiny. So thank you guys if you've watched any of these videos. I appreciate it. I just like showing these videos, showing a behind the scenes look at my writing and editing process. So I'm really quite proud about this book. It took a lot of work. It was definitely a struggle to do. The first draft of the book, or the first two drafts of the book, took like 3 or 4 years for me. I just struggled with it so much. I ran into plot holes and I had to rewrite the book a couple times. And yeah, it was not easy to do. And it's a big book. And yeah, so I really like it. It's not actually currently my favorite Trevor Knight book. My favorite Trevor Knight book, oh, actually it's right down here, is Arabian Dawn, which is the sequel to this book. I actually do like Arabian Dawn more than Ottoman Destiny, and I don't want to go into it too in depth, but I really love the characters of Arabian Dawn, and this book, Arabian Dawn, is currently entering the 5th draft, I believe. I've already done 1 edit of it. So now I could begin doing the 2nd edit of this book, Arabian Dawn. And yeah, so far of all my books, Arabian Dawn is actually my favorite book I've ever written. I think it's really my best book I've ever written. And really, I'm not upset about that, because I think each book, an artist should get better with each book they do, because they get more experienced. So German Derelict is not as good as Egyptian Demise. And then Syrian Dander, I think, is better than Egyptian Demise. And Ottoman Destiny, I think, is better than Syrian Dander. And Arabian Dawn is better than Ottoman Destiny. So yeah, I think that's just how it should be, because, you know, with each book I do, my writing skills should improve, my editing skills should improve, you know, I should just improve all around. I should be able to write better characters, I should be able to incorporate the plot better, do better dialogue, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so I do like Ottoman Destiny quite a bit. I think it's probably my favorite cover, though, just because it looks so pretty, like the silhouetted figures, and I think it's Hagia Sophia there in the background. It just looks so pretty and everything. And yeah, so I really like it. And this is my biggest book to date. Arabian Dawn is actually smaller than Ottoman Destiny, which, yeah, I don't mind that at all, because Arabian Dawn is a tighter story. Anyway, I'm really rambling here. So anyway, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope to see you in another video. Bye!
2, 3, 4.